Welcome to the Jerry Bovino Show. And now, here's Jerry.
Jerry Bovino, welcome back. We've got a terrific guest today, a repeat offender on the Jerry Bovino Show, Amy Kwei. Amy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I really always enjoy coming here.
Yeah, Amy's terrific, and she's now she's a famous author now that she has a second book out. Mm-hmm. Your first book was a children's book,
yeah.
And now she has a new book. If you want to come up to me on camera one, Amy Kwei, and the name of the book is A Concubine for the Family. Mm-hmm. Okay, Amy's the consummate storyteller, and she's going to tell us not only the tale about writing her second book, but also about what China was like 100 years ago and how it's changing. Mm-hmm. So, Amy, first of all, a little bit though. You started your writing here at the Aspen Writers Institute.
Actually, I guess so, in a way. I sort of always liked to write. And then I used to go to the Tuesday evening sessions. So this book is about 20 years in the making. It's actually my first book.
It was rattling, because I like to write, it rattles around in your head for years. And then you sort of puke it all out.
Right. And the thing is, people give you advice, and some are good and some are not so good. Some people say, A Concubine, that's a bad title. Nobody would accept that.
I love the title. Yeah.
See, but Aspen is more open. The people say, don't you know what the word means? They give me give me dictionary definition of it. And then, or some people will say, it's too strange. It's from the Chinese point of view. And most of the books written are very much on the American point of view.
Like when Pearl S. Buck wrote The Good Earth, which we all read, right? That was written more from it's a story about China, but she was an American.
And this is about a period that China today has so many Western ideas and Western concepts that are new, and China criticizes America, but they all want to send their children here.
Right. There's a lot of respect for certainly the Western education system.
Right.
But are the Chinese, like French are always worried that their culture is going to be degraded by all these Western traditions and the English words creeping in. Are the Chinese worried about retaining their culture, or are they open to an evolutionary model?
Depending on your age. I have an uncle in Tianjin, and he sends me little things about never buy a Japanese car, and we've had I don't know how many Japanese cars, and he sent me this wonderful poem about you should treat your husband like he is Xi Jinping, the new president. You have to treat your mother-in-law. All these traditional values that you honor your husband, and you have to do things. It's laughable from our point of view, but I'm sure he's trying to tell me, keep your culture.
Keep your culture. But so there is you got involved with the Aspen Writers Institute. Yeah. Do you think writing can be taught, or is writing something that you really, you have a feel for it and you know how to tell a story?
First of all, you have to have a good story.
Right. The most important thing is a good story. In movies, it's the same thing. You can have the best screenplay. Yeah. If you got a bad story, you're not going anywhere.
So whether you are a good writer or a bad writer, I think some of it is talent, some of it is learning, and the English language is something that you have to overcome, to have to learn. And it helped that I learned it as a child. And
could you have written this book in Chinese?
No, my Chinese is not good enough.
Do you and Tom talk English or Chinese at home?
English.
English.
Because we came here too early, and we could talk. I've got the restaurant ordering process all down packed, but but I cannot talk about politics philosophies, culture
In Chinese.
in Chinese,
But
because you
can-
didn't learn that.
Right, but if you need some like dim sum and
Yeah, I could. The thing is, I could recognize the word, but I cannot pronounce it correctly because of my mixed up background. Some of it, some words are pronouncing Mandarin. Some of it, it's called now the common language, and some of it in Shanghainese, some in Cantonese, and they're very different. Before we left for Shanghai, we were very young, and my parents said the kids in this, we lived in a high-rise, modern English section, and they said, you go and learn some Cantonese from these friends, little friends of yours. So we learned it, and we went to Hong Kong. It was all toilet language.
that's amazing, isn't it?
You know, but
what-
little kids could do that to you, you know?
What's interesting to me is everybody wants their children to learn Chinese now.
Yes.
It's funny because usually when you were in China, everybody wanted to learn English.
You're right.
Now everybody wants their children to learn Chinese because that's where the business is going to be coming from. It's a tremendous advantage.
Yes, and the thing is, we never taught our children Chinese, but my daughter now has a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and she's a plastic surgeon, and her assistants are Chinese, and she's hired her every Saturday to teach the kids Chinese, and because I try to speak some Chinese to them, but you know they don't listen to grandma.
Right, they don't want to. They don't want to talk it.
No.
But sometimes, like my friend Siobhan and her daughter Grace,
Mm-hmm.
Grace, who was born in China but speaks perfect English, goes also to a Chinese school one day a week.
Yeah.
So she'll speak Chinese, and she speaks, pretty well.
If the kid is probably a little older, we hope that when my grandchildren are older, they'll have facility. The thing is, in China, everybody wants to learn English. We taught, as I told you, went to the Yale group to China 2 years ago, and the kids. My name is Barbara. They all given English names, and they want to learn Chinese. I taught English through songs, Head, Shoulder, Knees, and Toes, and Old MacDonald. They know these songs. They think McDonald is McDonald hamburger, which is a high-class restaurant for them.
Exactly.
So
Very successful in China.
yeah,
You wouldn't have thought so, right?
I know. I think it's going to be wonderful for Sino-Chinese, Sino-American relationship because the language barrier would not be there. I've met some college students who have come from China, and they all speak sometimes more accentless English than I do because they have listened to the proper tapes. They study very hard from a very young age to speak with the proper Chinese English inflections. And it's somehow when you learn the language just growing up naturally, you always, whatever language I studied, I know some French, and that's with a Shanghai accent,
But I'm curious about something. You and Tom have been in the country for 60 years or whatever. Now we have a very multicultural society. When you first got here, did either of you experience prejudice at any point?
I was too young. I think we were isolated. And I went to a Catholic school, and the nuns were very protective. And
but the preponderance of students in your school...
I know I'm different. I'm different, And but when you're young, I don't think it's as bad. And I spoke English already. So I think the children, the people who come here as scholars, for instance, they really feel they could never belong. But they know their children will belong. And this is the wonderful thing about this culture. I don't think in any other culture you could be integrated and become its citizen and part of You know,
it's
my
amazing
children,
about America. It really
that
is.
it really
because
is.
we embrace our immigrants and we integrate them. If you look at the immigrants in Europe,
Yeah.
they live separate
I know.
from the mainstream
Yeah.
European
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
But here, you know, after they're here for a while, you get some Indian kids and they come over here and pretty soon they're all eating McDonald's and it's just regular kids.
Right.
For an Indian kid, that's pretty amazing because
Yeah.
they're not supposed to eat beef. But okay, so let's talk about the book. So first of all, tell us define a concubine.
A concubine is a second wife or third wife or fourth wife.
Okay, but they don't actually marry.
They sometimes go through some kind of a celebration.
Ceremony. Yeah.
Celebration that a big banquet in the book. The book is divided into 3 parts, and it's the last chapter of the first book, and it was a big. People celebrate important birthdays, 50th, 60th birthdays, and then she was presented as a birthday present to my grandmother. Presented her to her husband as a birthday present.
Your grandmother presented the concubine, but now this fascinates me because your grandmother is initiating this. Like if you go to African cultures,
Yeah.
the chief can take 2, 3, 4 wives,
Yeah.
but he picks them.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether he requires the blessings of his first, second, and third wife.
Most often you don't.
You don't. But this is fascinating because there's a sexual component to this.
Yeah.
And so explain, like, just tell it doesn't.
Well, my grandmother is very smart because they have only 2 girls. In the book, I call them Golden Bell, Silver Bell. I'm supposed to be the daughter of a Silver Bell eventually. And, my grandfather went to a university called St. John's University in Shanghai, which is a missionary school. And he's westernized and he's very patriotic. And there's a whole group of people who are anti-Japanese, and he wasn't thinking about a concubine. And but tradition requires so many things for the family to continue to be a gentry, to be leader of the society. So my grandmother's very smart. If you waited for your husband to go outside and find somebody and bring it in, and you're going to have conflict. But if she found a young woman for her husband, chances are she is still wife number 1.
Does she feel like by bringing in a second woman for her husband, girl probably, probably someone younger, right?
Yeah.
Does she feel like it's giving her some control over the situation that might have otherwise spun out of control?
Definitely. And of course, she is highly educated woman, not in the sense of modern education, but in poetry, in playing chess.
Your grandmother?
Yes.
But not the concubine?
Not the concubine. But she had picked up this girl when she herself was a teenager. She found this girl chewing on tree bark on the street.
She was poor.
She was poor. She was a beggar. So she picked her up and brought her in. She has bound feet. And this
Okay,
girl,
explain the
this
bound
woman,
feet before we go, because I love this whole concept, which is something Americans just don't get. But
Yeah.
explain the concept of small feet and bound feet. Just go through the whole thing.
Well, I think for some reason, human nature want the women to walk with a sway. Today, you look at the model on the fashion show, they don't walk straight, they sway. Okay, now we get them high heel shoes. In the old days, some say it's a way of controlling women, because women are before BC, there was a female emperor. The women can become very powerful. So how it started, there was a foot fetish for the men, and they it's very cruel. It's really
They wanted
cruel.
small feet.
A tiny
Small feet are considered attractive.
very attractive.
And so
you could
explain what they
hobble.
actually do. Tell us.
The last two toes are bent under, crushed under the sole. And then
What do they actually bind it with?
cloth,
Cloth.
just cloth. First of all, it's nothing, and then they just bind it and make it tighter to get the kid, and then they crush the two last toes.
Sounds like torture to me.
It is. It is. It is. It's really.
Are they still
cruelty.
doing this in modern day China?
No, it was abolished 1911 when
Okay.
the first republic started. The people look down on menial labor. If a rich family, a book-fragrant family, has these big-footed women, that means you're preparing them for menial labor.
I
It's a
see.
big loss of face.
So, okay, so now your grandmother, and this is based on a true story,
Right.
picks a concubine that
Yeah.
she was originally a beggar on the street to become a sexual partner with her husband.
No. She became a personal maid to my grandmother.
First, she became a personal maid,
for
and
many
then,
years until she's 21 or she's ready to be married. And she bathed my grandmother. She, as a toddler, I wandered all around the house and got into the room, and I saw her bathing my grandmother with this tiny feet, which her feet were not terribly deformed because my grandfather stopped it. After the two toes are pressed under, she was crying and screaming so much, they did not push the heel inside. So it's still 6 inches, but not, huge. Tiny, like the really supposedly fashionable people. And she is helpless without this personal maid.
but how, when finally the maid was 21, and then she suggested to your grandfather that she become his concubine, I
Yeah.
guess. How did your grandfather react? I mean, like, I'd say that was pretty cool, but I don't know how, in Chinese culture, what is the appropriate response for the man at
He
something?
sort of resigned and gave in because he realized that's his duty towards his ancestors to provide an heir.
Okay, so they already had 2 daughters.
Yes, and when you die, the son is supposed to, even though the law at the time that said, that people, the sons do not, if you don't, the daughters can inherit, but still the tradition. When you die, the son has to move your head on top of the pillow in the coffin. Now, nobody wants to do that without being named an heir. And it's a son who has to offer, to pay respect on the holidays, to bow and kowtow in front of the ancestors' tablets on the grave. And
that's why having a male heir is so important.
So
Fascinating.
important. So, of course, you read Jane Austen's novels. The cousin's going to come in and inherit. It's universal for some reason.
So, in this example, where we have the importance now in modern day China, which still surprises me. I could understand 100 years ago that women, they wanted a son, but even now in modern day China, female babies are just abandoned.
This year we mentored a scholar from China. She teaches English in Jiao Tong University in Shanghai, and she's here. Now Yale allows these scholars to have attend any class they want, and the government gives her a stipend, which is about $1,700 a month, which is pretty good. She shares an apartment with another scholar, and so she has a lot of money to buy. They all want Gucci bags and Coach things.
Why not?
The brand names.
Now I'm going to make
she goes. She has only one daughter, so I ask her, "Are you under pressure to produce a son? He said, no, when she's grown up, she's going to be very, very valuable. And she's going to be really sought after. And I said, and then she saves a lot of money. I said, what are you going to do when you bring her? She said, I'm saving it because she's coming here to study.
So if you have, let's say I'm in a Chinese man in a
Yeah.
traditional marriage,
Yeah.
and I have a son,
Yeah.
would my wife still want to offer me a concubine, or would that be less likely?
No.
No.
And especially today.
So you never
So
thought
things
about
are-
getting one for Tom, huh?
No.
I knew that would make you laugh. So what about like sexuality in China? Does China have an enlightened view of sexuality? Are they more like the French or more like the, I don't know what, the English? What would you say?
I think it's not obvious because they do not approve of open affection, because the husband and wife sometimes call each other brothers and sisters. You certainly won't
Fascinating.
hold hands with.
You
with
wouldn't in public?
No.
Like in India,
or
also the
kissing,
same
Or
thing.
kissing, Nowadays they have these things, but in the old days it's totally taboo. It's very
Private.
polite and private. Sexuality is not something to be discussed.
How about homosexuality? Is that something now that in modern day China is like we're more enlightened about homosexuality in America? Is that something in China that they're evolving to, or is it still?
Well, homosexuality is universal and it's sanctioned. The Chinese traditionally always have male actors to sing Chinese operas. Okay, they sing falsetto voices. All these famous Chinese sopranos are male. In this country, the entertainers are celebrities. But in China, if you're an entertainer, you're a lower class. And only the males go into it. And a lot of homosexuality within these groups. And they and a lot of patrons who are fans of these sopranos, they're homosexuals.
Yeah, yeah.
And they will, in a way, keep them as concubine or keep them on the side with money besides, attending their shows. So that's,
Yeah.
I think it's part of our human biology for some reason that some people prefer
Yeah, the same sex.
same sex. But
So-
you don't see, you never talked about the women being lesbians. Anyway.
In Chinese culture?
No.
No. Well, in your book, Purple Jade,
Yeah, the
one of
grandmother.
the main characters, finds Miss Tyler, who's an American teacher at the Christian school, defense of women odd.
Yes.
Explain that.
Well, she's very traditional. She doesn't think that women can do the things the men do. And
Purple Jade doesn't.
she
No.
doesn't think. And I think many men and women today still think that way, in this country as well as in China.
In this country, we don't like to admit it, but it's out there.
It's out there.
Yeah. That's why we have a glass ceiling in a lot of these
Right.
corporations.
The virtuous woman in the old days is somebody who does beautiful needlework, who could manage her household, but being very gentle and reasonable, and who could write poetry, who could, but not be a doctor.
Right, or running a business. That wouldn't be
Business.
something 100
No.
years ago that
No.
a woman in China would aspire to.
Right.
Probably not here either very much in those
Yeah,
days. But we've had a very rapid evolution.
Yes.
And do you think that's going to come to China?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. The new president's wife was an entertainer, was a singer, and she's very modern, and so I don't know if that will do something, But I think it used to be the leaders that come. They have these the wives who just can't talk and can't be I don't know if they're educated, but they certainly do not play a role.
Amy,
So-
what would you want the book's written in English, so it's predominantly for an American,
Yeah.
European audience,
Yeah.
let's say. What would you want your reader to take away from this book? If they could learn one or two things, what do you think it is that you really want them to see about life?
Well, I think it's a wonderful thing for human beings to understand each other. And this book tells stories of how people are so different, but their emotions are so much alike. We feel about our children the way a Chinese woman do. Okay, we want to maintain the integrity of our families the same way the Chinese, it's emotions. That's why I feel telling a story is better than writing a historical piece, because historical piece, you tend to, it's very informative, but you don't resonate emotionally.
And you don't really identify with the characters like you would if you become part of the story as you're reading.
Right, and try to understand people who cannot speak your language, who have very different point of view, but they are human beings sharing some of these values that we treasure in this country. And I think that eventually is what's going to integrate the human race. It's just that we accept each other because we know they share the same feelings.
If you could tell us 3 values that are important in Chinese families, things that are revered,
Yeah.
what would you tell us they are?
I think number 1 is education. And that I find
That
more.
sounds like a Jewish family.
That's what I was just going to
Same
say.
thing.
My son-in-law is Jewish, and it's number 1 is education, and family cohesion. The second one, how in this country it's always the parents giving to the child, our obligation to the child, and somehow there's not very much emphasis on the children's obligation to you.
Which there is in Chinese culture.
There is in Chinese culture, and I think that's something the Western culture can learn from, because it helps to create family cohesion. Of course, you know, nobody is perfect. Many Chinese families have very many sons and daughters, and if they come from different wives, you know, there's squabbles and
they can be rebellious too.
They're just like the American family, and nowadays they go to court for the inheritance, or they don't speak to each other anymore. And so, you know, that's why a story is knowing other families, other cultures, is so important. We know it's the same.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we all have, you know, 46
Right,
chromosomes.
right.
But when you look at your story, which is you know, a story, it's about a family. It could really be any family.
Right.
It's just done with Chinese cultural tradition. The one thing that I like about China that is this reverence for the elderly. We've
right.
lost that in America.
That's right.
You know, if
That's
someone
right.
achieves a great age and has wisdom,
Yes.
that's revered in China. It's
Right.
not in America.
Right. That's very much taught, and I think also the Chinese has a very different worldview in terms. We're basically a Christian society. We believe every person is born a sinner, and you need to be baptized to be washed of your sin. The Chinese believe every child is born good, and it's only
I like
if,
that.
and if you are not well educated, if you do not educate the child properly, then he becomes bad. The badness comes from a
Lack.
distortion of
Yeah,
nature.
interesting. Well, we've got to do a wrap. I wish we had more time.
Yeah.
I want to thank Amy Kwei. She has a new book out, A Concubine for the Family, A Family Saga in China. Pick it up and read it. I guess it's available on Amazon, huh?
And explore.
And Explorer Bookstore. Go to Explorer Bookstore. Thanks to Amy. Thanks to Tom, her husband. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.
And could you just say that I'll be talking in the Aspen's summer conference, writers conference?
Yes, and Amy will be talking in the Writers' Conference this summer.
Okay.
Okay. See you next week. Thanks,
Thank you.
Amy.
Thank you
Great
so
show.
much.